Tēnā koutou. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our first council meeting for 2025. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome to the big decisions for 2025 about surviving or thriving. Here we are, and big expectations on us for the year. We've got lots to cover, and we've got a community that's in a really interesting space. They've been challenged. We are on the eve of the 2-year anniversary of the Cyclone Gabrielle devastation that ripped through our community. We've got people that are still feeling trauma, that are still in recovery, but we've also got lots of community that needs hope and leadership, and actually where to next in our community. And we walk that really fine balance, the responsibility that we sit here at this table to do that. And so we're going to have some challenging decisions to make as we move forward into 2025, but there is so much to look forward to as we tackle those big challenges. So welcome to everybody. And as we move into our meeting for this morning, let's have karakia together. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka tau ki te tonga. Ia mā kina ki uta, ia mā taratara ki whai. E hi ati ana te atakura, e teo, e huka, e hauru, e hei, mauri ora. Right, so we have got a relatively short agenda this morning of decision making, but first of all, we'll note the apology from the Galbraith. Ask for a seconder, please. And Margaret. Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. Do we have any declaration of conflicts of interest that members would like to put on the table now? Otherwise, at any time in the meeting. Standing orders, I'm not going to read the details of the standing orders. This is our usual mode of operation. Can I have a mover and seconder, please? Councillor Greer and Councillor Taylor. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against. Carried. We have the last council minutes to be confirmed. They were from the 31st of October. We need to move that they are confirmed as true and correct. Are there any issues that we need to deal with before we do that? Right. So can I have a mover and seconder, please, that they are a true and correct record? Councillor Byrne and Councillor Whitman. Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against. Carried. And we move to page 17 of the agenda, which is the resolution monitoring report, to give us an update on where things are up to. Good morning, Mr. Tate. Over to you.
Great. Good morning, Your Worship and councillors, formally for the first time for 2025. So look, going through resolution monitoring report, pleasingly there are some activities, particularly notable district plan now, which is complete in terms of the actions from our previous meetings. Just probably noting the one that is probably still of comment is the establishment of the Hawke's Bay Community Water Trust, and our aim now is to have that. So previously we'd had planned on working with Aotearoa on a joint process, and we're going to go separately, which was a decision from earlier this week. So other than that, happy to take any questions.
Sorry, Ken.
Central Lines Aquatic Centre, we talked about that in June 23, so we're nearly coming up to 2 years now. At the time it was urgent, even then. 2 years. Can we have an explanation why it's taken so long to get an answer?
Through you, Madam Chair. So the urgent language talks about the works that needed to be confirmed, which we have completed. We've got some minor implementation things we're just working through. In terms of the trust itself, we had a really positive meeting with the trust, which was externally facilitated on Tuesday, and I've actually got a briefing for councillors very shortly. Good progress overall.
Anyone else? Good. Okay, can I have a mover and seconder that the council notes this resolution report? So Moynihan and Councillor Annand. Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against. Carries. Item 7.2, page 21 is update on the draft annual plan for 25-26 that we have been working on for the last little while. It's great for host and a present.
I'll open and I'll Mr. Chamberlain. Good morning again, councillors. Look, this report is in particular to give some good visibility over the work that has been going on in the background in terms of the draft annual plan. While we've had public workshops, this is the first time that it has been formally brought to you in terms of a council meeting to update you on progress. I just really want to note, and look, you, Mr. Chamberlain, will go back through the detail. We went through a very deliberate and ruthlessly focused process in 2024, focusing on our 3-year plan around our key priorities. That got us to a process where we had obviously a 20% rating increase on average last year, and then a forecast 14.9% increase this year, focused around what was our key and most urgent priorities, particularly relating to drinking water, land transport and recovery. In the report, we'll go through it. In short, we've got more work to do. We're still sitting at 10.9 and the report talks about that. There is more work to do, so I'm certainly not saying that 10.9 is our number. There is more work to do. The second part of the report, and I'll let Mr. Chamberlain go through the substantial piece of the annual plan. We do have a QV update, and there is a public workshop later on QV as well, where again, Mr. Chamberlain will be providing an update on that. There are some delays that we have been notified of earlier this week, which we expect to hear more about this afternoon. But would suggest, Your Worship, and happy to take your advice on it. We'll receive the update on the 3-year plan, and then happy to speak further to the Hawke's Bay tourism matter as well, which I'm seeking direction from you as part of today's report as well. So with that, I'll hand to Mr. Chamberlain, and we'll pick up perhaps at the end on Hawke's Bay tourism.
Good morning, councillors and Your Worship. So as Mr. Tate has alluded, this is an update on where we're at with this annual plan. And we're also asking for you to endorse the direction and also how we handle the Hawke's Bay tourism, again, which Mr. Tate has alluded to. So as mentioned, we prepared a 3-year plan, and this was adopted back in June 24. The annual plan that we now are considering is year 2 of this 3-year plan, and year 2 of the 3-year plan was the starting point for preparing this budget. So just to remind you, the 3-year plan had particular focus areas. One was on improving our land transport, which is the roading network here in Central Hawke's Bay. The other was a continuation of the water investments. And finally was a continuation of our cyclone recovery. As the Mayor mentioned this morning, it's coming up to the 2-year anniversary. And while we're 2 years down the track, a lot of roads are still being repaired. So the year 2 of the 3-year plan, as mentioned, had a forecast rate increase of 14.9%. Just reminding you that 14.9% was the average. It didn't fall evenly across the district. Those ratepayers connected to water services were receive approximately 18.4% increase, and the rural that look after their own water and sewage was going to be 12.2%. The reason that it was so high was that there were a number of drivers, one being inflation. At the time that we wrote the 3-year plan, we were still expecting inflation to be in the mid threes. As we do all these water upgrades, we're borrowing to do that, and the loan servicing is coming on stream. And again, at the time that we wrote the 3-year plan, interest rates were much higher than what they are today. Obviously, one of the focus areas was land transport, and there was going to be a increase in focus on expenditure in that area. And we had some better off funding, which is the tail end of the Three Waters reform money, which was due to expire. So that was dropping out of our income. And finally, obviously, we were still planning to continue our recovery efforts in terms of our roading repairs. So that's where we were, and that was the context that the 14.9% was set. Obviously, things have changed slightly. Our inflation has fallen. We're back down into the Reserve Bank's neutral zone of 2 to 3%. At the time that we wrote the 3-year plan, we were still waiting on Waka Kotahi to confirm what their 3-year funding for this council was. That's now been confirmed, and so that can be adjusted in our budgets. And all of these things have been factored in. In addition, officers have been reviewing the construction programs for the Three Water upgrades and been looking for other savings and reviewing staffing levels given the downturn in some of the areas such as consenting. To date, this has resulted in us getting the proposed rate down to 10.9. However, this isn't where we're going to end up landing. We are still, as officers, continuing to review. So a couple of areas that we need to confirm. What will our consenting volumes be? What will our solid waste volumes be? And these are both driven by economic conditions and what some of our neighbouring councils are doing. And we're also revising and looking at the sequencing of our reservoir replacements in our second supply project. And we continue to focus on right-sizing this council for the size of the district. So as I say, we're at 10.9. We hope to find more savings, and there'll be further reports coming back to council over February and March, where we look at further refining with a final decision to be made in April or May. There are a number of assumptions still in this budget that we just want to confirm today. One is that the levels of service that we set in the 3-year plan and consulted on are still the levels of service that we intend to deliver, which means that this budget, even though it's slightly lower than what we originally planned, is still going to deliver everything that we said we were going to deliver, negating the need for separate consultation. The other thing that we wish to confirm today is how we fund Hawke's Bay tourism. So Hawke's Bay tourism historically has been funded through a different mechanism, and Doug Tate will talk more to that later on. But we've got a provision in the annual plan at the moment of 75,000. We just need to confirm that. So that's where we're at with the budget to date. I'll also just give you a quick update on the revaluation of the district. So every 3 years, the council gets the district properties revalued by quotable value. They're an independent valuation organisation. And the values that they set will be as at the market conditions at September 2024. So the last ones that we did were in September 23, which was the height of the market. So I know that a number of ratepayers have been saying, my house isn't worth that anymore. Why are you still rating on that? So this is our chance to reset that. The budgets that we're setting at the moment and the amount of rates that we collect, just to be clear, aren't related to this valuation. The valuation is how we spread those rates across the district. And assuming that every property has moved uniformly either up or down, it shouldn't affect the amount of rates that you pay. Where it will affect is if your property has moved more or less than the average. At the moment, the indicative numbers that quotable value are telling me is that on average, the capital value of properties has fallen by 7.9% across the district, and land values have fallen by 13.1%. We have Sophie from Quotable Value coming and talking in workshop and giving a more detailed breakdown of the nuances behind that this afternoon. And despite what the report says, that the numbers will be released later in February, this is now due to some audit holdups, is now going to occur later in March. I'll take the rest of the report as read, but happy to answer any questions or hand back to
Mr. Chamberlain. I think, well, how you guys have set it out is that we'll deal with the third recommendation around Hawke's Bay tourism separately. So the first part is continuing the direction that we're on and the focus that we've had from the LTP on land transport, critical three waters and recovery. And that we're continuing with that despite the fact that we're looking for ways to right-size everything as we're moving through this annual plan process. And also there's been a resolution of, no, there hasn't been a resolution of council, but the underlying mechanism through this is actually if we continue on this track and we say that there's not a significant change to levels of service, we're on track just to adopt an annual plan, have a conversation with community, but it's not a formal submissions and hearings process. We want to do that. We've got to we've got to pull that trigger today. Otherwise, that won't be how it plays out. If we're sticking with the levels of service in the plan and the direction of the LTP, then we'll carry on. So that's implicit to those recommendations. So we'll open for questions about that direction, and we've got the opportunity to provide further feedback on the things that need further work on. So this team have said 4 areas where they're continuing to do focused work around the consenting volumes and revenue sources, the solid waste volumes and revenue sources, the programming of capital works, particularly around reservoirs, and the right sizing piece of work, which is about making sure that we're not over catering as a business to what's required to be delivered. So any questions? So Aitken.
Just a quick clarification, when you say property and land, when you say property, that is the actual capital sitting on the property?
So land value, which is basically just the bare land underneath the properties, is 13%. And the capital value, which is land and buildings and other improvements, is 7.9% decline.
And just through you, Your Worship, so they're unconfirmed, they're still draft numbers, and we will have a workshop this afternoon.
I know we're going to have a workshop.
We can roll the QV for those.
So Anna.
The proposed increase of 30% for stormwater, then it says that there's a carry forward portion from the Better Off funding. The reason for that carry forward and that money not being spent.
Through you, Your Worship, so that's where we have in the current financial year. It's just basically we've got a better understanding of what the actual costs were. So based on the forecast that we need this year, we actually calculate we don't need as much. So it's a positive thing that we've actually been able to reduce the rate from what was basically 100% increase down to 30%. Yeah. Based on actual costs and the forecast for this current year. So a good news story there.
My further question was, what would that be for year 2? What would happen as a result of that in year 3? So it's fine to get us into this year, but what would the consequence of that be for the following year?
It's quite a detailed
Yeah,
question. I'm wondering whether we might just get a further description of that. We have got a workshop later this afternoon talking about water and wastewater. We have talked about phasing of drinking water, but perhaps that's something we can just get a bit more detail on. It's a good, it's a great question, because when we make a annual decision, it always has a knock on.
There's a knock on,
Yeah.
exactly, so we might be saving money this year, but can sometimes price in the following year, so. Just want to make sure that we're not just stuck.
It's having a smoothing.
So the amount that we're carrying forward, I can't. I'm dragging the back of my mind. I think it's about 60,000. So that means that we're able to fund $60,000 of the activity for year 2 out of this better off funding, but that 60,000 won't be there for year 3. So if we carry on doing the same level of activity in year 2 and in year 3, that'll automatically be a $60,000 rate increase.
With some additional information.
Right, thank you. Questions on that direction? It's pretty clearly spelled out in the paper. I mean, the thing for me is actually underneath that headline of we've got it down to 10 is actually those 3 waters rates, particularly the drinking water rate, which has got a pretty hefty increase, and understanding the piece that you've got there about continuing to rephase some of that work and the understanding of that work. So I understand that, but that's going to be a pretty confronting number to still have that increase on drinking. Okay, good. Can I have a mover and seconder for number 1 and number 2, please? Number 1 is endorse the work to date on the draft annual plan and request officers to continue exploring further budget savings, bringing further updates back to council through March and April. And number 2 intends no changes to the levels of service outlined in the 3-year plan, raising the need for separate public consultation on the draft annual plan. Councillor Annett, seconder. Councillor Taylor. I would like to speak. Right, Councillor Taylor. Anyone else? No, that's good. I just want to add one thing, which is that this 3-year plan was really focused and dedicated to core infrastructure and the direction of keeping on top of the track that we've been on to catch up and respect our infrastructure away in a way that hasn't been done in the past. To continue that path of recovery, and we always knew it was challenging, and we've downplayed so many other things in the plan across other investments, particularly in the community facilities and space, where very clearly we're targeting investment, infrastructure investment into our pipes, roads and pumps locally. And that's a challenging place for us to be, but it is very focused on our core purpose. So this direction, while challenging still with the rates increase numbers, I'm pleased to see the support from the table that continues that direction, tough as it may be. Councillor Annett, you've got right of reply. Moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Against. Carried. Right. Let's talk about the Hawke's Bay tourism request. 8.
Excuse me. So on page 23 is the update on the request for confirmation of funding for tourism. So this has come about by way of Hawke's Bay Regional Council no longer regionally rating for Hawke's Bay tourism. This was flagged in their 2024 3-year plan as well. There was basically a sort of an abeyance for a period of 12 months where there was an opportunity for the region to look at how that was funded. We've, as Mr. Chamberlain alluded before, we've included 75,000 as a proportion of a total of just over $1 million in terms of the total allocation for all of Hawke's Bay to see Hawke's Bay tourism continue in a much reduced capacity moving forward. So just noting again, the 75k is currently sitting in that 10.9, equates roughly currently to a 0.2% rating increase. Probably the biggest thing I want to kind of impart in terms of why I've included the funding and really the recommendation for it to be included is the importance of in a future of tourism in terms of our long-term economic outlook. It's been a key pillar in our key strategic documents we've had in terms of our regional economic development focus, but particularly in a central Hawke's Bay context. It's been a large part of what was our tourism infrastructure needs assessment that we did back in 2019 and 2020, as well as our economic development. Look, I'm not going to go into GDP or any of those sorts of aspects as well, but there is an important place to play in terms of the role that Hawke's Bay Tourism has been brand Hawke's Bay. We have previously in years contributed upwards of 75, it was closer to 85,000 in previous years of the LTP, and really noting that in many respects this is bringing back that local funding of Hawke's Bay Tourism that was retained. So but the report really speaks for itself. Again, looking for confirmation today of funding for Hawke's Bay Tourism. The key point in decision today is the timing of this is quite important. The directors or the board of directors of Hawke's Bay Tourism have some very clear responsibilities whereby if funding isn't confirmed in the near future, they have directors' obligations to basically wind it up. So you can reflect on the history of other entities that have supported tourism and other entities that we've seen come and go. I'll leave it as that. So, take any questions now.
Just on the slides that were presented at the last workshop, Hawke's Bay Tourism, we're looking for 675,000, with 300,000 coming from Hastings District Council and Napier City Council, nothing coming from Wairoa. Has that changed?
So through you, your worship, so the contributions from both Napier and Hastings have increased, and to date we haven't heard anything.
I think the point being that split that was spoken about there was from the direction from about 6 months ago, where the proposal regionally was still to split the funding 3 ways between the 3 big councils, being Regional Council, Hastings and Napier. And the direction of travel on that has been relatively positive, apart from Regional Council then pulled out. So Hawke's Bay Tourism then did the numbers on, well, there's good direction on roughly 675,000. Is that enough? They did some work on whether that's the minimum viable product, and actually at that level of funding, it's worth it. If we can get the funding to the $1 million mark. And when we were in Wairoa a couple of weeks ago, the door was definitely open with that conversation with Wairoa. We're just like us, they're in the process of how do we confirm that.
Yeah, because when you look at those numbers, we're head of population, we're actually contributing a hell of a lot more than the others. And like you made the point, and yeah, and you'd have to argue that, do we actually get the value? Thank you.
So definitely that was the direction from the workshop that certainly I had taken across to my peers and the other councils, was that the whole pie needed to grow, but our contribution to that pie definitely can't grow, because I agree with you, we were overrepresented in the contribution. You know how it had been drawn together, and actually everyone else needed to go up, but we wouldn't be. Councillor Moynihan.
Yes, I was reading through the report, and it stated that in regards about Hawke's Bay Tourism, in the event that funding is confirmed, which was on page 23, stated that a letter of expectation requirements and associated KPIs be included. So my question is, in the past, we've sort of talked about KPIs, and could they add them, and could we see if they are actually there as a result? So my request, could we request from them, like at the end of the financial year or some report somewhere along the way, that Hawke's Bay Tourism provides a comprehensive report detailing or showing our specific requirements outlined in the letter of expectations, including key performance metrics we met or aligned to what we requested. Could we ask for that report? So this is what KPIs are. How have you done that? Can it be matched? Is it possible?
So through you, your worship. So as you've outlined on the bottom of page 23, there's a number of activities and items that we will be working regionally on to make sure we've got good visibility and transparency over the expenditure that occurs. I'll leave it as that. I'm comfortable that we'll work through a process that ensures this table has good governance visibility in terms of the letter of expectation and the associated KPIs that come with it. There is probably just a word of caution that the budget that they will be operating on is a significantly reduced budget from what they currently operate on. So just in terms of being prepared for not expecting more, I'll be expecting the same and less in terms of the funding envelope that is available. So, but certainly, councillor, in terms of the level of expectation, transparency, accountability, reporting, that's certainly not my expectation. That will be across all the CEs and councils.
It's probably the opportunity too, councillor, right? So HBRC have clearly shown through, I don't know whether you could call it stewardship actually, over the last few years that actually they haven't been really concerned about that and we haven't seen that. And so it's, if we take this on, that's certainly something we can take more seriously. Councillor Aitken.
My concern with this whole process is that we had a report that came to us that didn't even use their own figures on their annual report, which I find quite mind-blowing that the general manager comes in here and gives a report using someone else's figures. And I don't care what the arguments or anything about it. In the annual report, he had figures and then he used figures that absolutely inflated what his report was saying. So I want to put that on the table straight away. I find that my bullshit radar goes off pretty high when that happens. I requested a budget for 2026. I'm looking at it now. Again, my bullshit radar is going full tilt at the moment because it's sitting here saying operating expenses $800,000. No expectation what that is. So you're asking us for our ratepayers to go over $1 million, and I'm talking about all councils, with no expectation, or a company that is asking for $1 million that is not prepared to actually show us what they've spent on their books. I find that mind-blowing. We ask our staff here down to the cent what we're using our money for, our ratepayers. So I don't disagree with having multi-day tourism, but on page 23 you talk about KPIs, reporting, clarification of appointments and things like that, and I agree with that. But I also, before we give them their money, I want to see a full set of report, a full annual report for the last 3 years, exactly what they're spending their money on, how much money's coming to CHB, and stuff like that. To get a budget like that, it just blows my mind that someone comes in here and wants $75,000 from our ratepayers and gives me a budget like that. If I was in my normal business, I'd just tell them to walk away. I'd just walk, wouldn't even touch it. So unless I get that, I'm not going to support this.
So your question is, councillor, can we ask for a step to happen after the resolution of today, which is that between now and when actually the funding year starts, that we've had a robust report on a detailed business report so that we can see what has been happening and we can use that to base what future KPIs look like?
No, I'm actually wanted to, before I agree that we will pay the money once we get a full report. And if we don't get a full annual report on where that money is being spent and coming back what's spent on Central Hawke's Bay, then we don't give them the money. I want to see an annual report and all the money is given to them.
Just get a sense from Mr. Tate what the practicalities of that are.
Yeah, so through you, we should like, and council to give some confidence, like that is part of the due diligence process that I will be going through. And that's the chief executive of this organisation. I'm pretty confident the same things will be happening for Hastings and for Napier as well. So, but certainly if there was an appetite to change the resolution that says, subject to further due diligence from the chief executive or something along those lines, that will be part of the diligence that I'm expecting to undertake anyway in terms of a full breakdown of that. I think in terms of the budget that has been brought forward as well, this is a clear starting point. This is assuming that there is actual funding to actually be received across the region as well. So look, that's got to be part of as we work through the processes as well.
So how about we maybe turn the resolution, we could, and I'm just going to wait till we have some other questions, but I wonder whether we could turn the resolution around to be, rather than saying confirm the request for funding from Hawke's Bay Tourism, we actually take words which is that we confirm we will include 75,000 in our proposed budget for the annual plan for the Hawke's Bay tourism activities, but there's further executive work that needs, there's further executive work that needs to happen.
And we're comfortable. Yep, absolutely.
Councillor Annand.
My question is, the 85,000 that we talked about previously, where is that now within our budget? Is it things to the local level around?
So through you, Worship, it's significantly reduced. So the total funding that we put into now, what is spring fling, is only about 30,000 a year. So it's a much reduced. So basically, the budget's probably reduced.
My second question is that have ELT considered through the economic tourism sort of spend and budgets that we could potentially find that $75,000 from within existing budgets for a reshuffle of roles, and could we put some of the expectation not just for Hawke's Bay tourism, but also in the economic space as well, economic development space. But more lean towards our regional partners to do a bit more in our community than what they have been doing. So, could it come down to actually they send a person here to be able to fill stuff that we haven't got or haven't necessarily been able to get off the ground.
And look, through you, which I'll answer kind of in two parts. In the 3-year plan last year, we went through a pretty robust process of finding all of those ED budgets. So there's basically there's no room to move in those existing ED budgets. So it's tight without giving something up. That's it in a nutshell. In terms of like staff reallocation, it's a very small percentage, and really what the funding is coming back to is really regional and national tourism marketing that we won't see here, to attract people into the region. So it's a different set of skills. It's a different it's a different function than what we would provide here on. So to that end, the logic of again asking for kind of a more in a context where the funding bucket has been reduced, probably not going to be viable. Again, just being clear that the product we're buying is for brand Hawke's Bay outside of the region, a hierarchy of the national body internationally. Hawke's Bay tourism is about get them to the country and then get them to Hawke's Bay. So it's
the sense. So I've been to a few meetings on this, councillor, and one of them was at the end of last year with wider industry leaders, and I think the $1 million minimum viable product conversation literally is a minimum viable product conversation, where then there needs to be actually what is the proper investment going forward and what could and should that look like. And so the decreasing situation they've been in, because that funding has put them in a place, and the government funding, without regional and local funding, the government funding dries up as well. And so they've been in survival mode of actually what's the minimum viable product. They haven't been in a leadership space of, well, actually, what is the minimum effective investment? Should it actually be for the region 2 million or 3 million to actually get the best out of it? They haven't been there, and I think the opportunity is, if we can keep the minimum viable product, they've got the opportunity to explore what else, how else could it be done differently. That's the sense that I've got. So the tourism operators that were there were frustrated by that. They were willing to and are contributing more. And nowhere else in the country does that. But there's this literally is a minimum viable product conversation currently at the current funding.
the hardest part for me is when, especially when you've been around a long time, is that I've been through a stage where I saw a person working for Hawke's Bay Tourism that was based here in Central Hawke's Bay, and that's the most investment that I was able to see as a result of our investment locally, and then also for our regional dollar being applied here in Central Hawke's Bay. So, you know, and I agree with Councillor Moynihan and Councillor Aiken, we have to see evidence on the ground of what that gets us, because in our mind, from a rural sense, all we're saying, yes, I understand brand, I understand exportable products, I understand all of that sort of stuff. The hard part is from a visual sense, for Central Hawke's Bay, we're seeing, what we're seeing is effectively $1 million on a marketing and a communications campaign. And I know that there'll be more to it because we run our own spring fling. And that everything that was created through Hawke's Bay Tourism is now ours to deliver on with us and our people. And so, you know, when you think about all the markets that are delivered and all that sort of stuff, it's all done by volunteers. So yeah, I think, you know, and Wairoa will probably go through that same thing as well, is that for a rural district like us, we need to see the proof of what we're getting, and it needs to be visual. It can't be just this stuff out there in the ether that would, I mean, because people are visual and they need to know. Yeah, so I mean, I believe in this regional stuff. I'm very supportive of it, and I know that we need to continue to be able, because we're just going to go back with something like, I think having that a bit more buy-in to actually get those KPIs on the ground and I will actually be quite an interesting opportunity for us.
I think the question about the visual stuff is important. When you see the Welcome to Hawke's Bay sign on Tukapai Plains, it's got a picture of Tomato Peak. And actually that's in Central Hawke's Bay, that sign. And so there's some really easy, obvious, tangible things. Like, I agree with you that there is some things that need to be done differently. So Whichman.
Thank you, Worship. I get the regional context. We here have the ability within our current structure that we have to feed up to Hawke's Bay Tourism. Like I see their stuff on our Facebook pages, the beautiful beaches we have. That's locally. And we feed that information up to them, and then they promote it out regionally, nationally from them. So that we do have, as you're coming into Central Hawke's Bay, you see our beautiful beaches, you have promotion around Ngāra Tipuna, the longest place name in Central Hawke's Bay.
Through, so if you jump on HB Tourism's website, they really do a large part of that. A lot of what we do is, and what even the members of Hawke's Bay Tourism that reside inside the district are pushing that collateral back out as well. So, you know, places like the longest place name, up on website, for Video 5, if you're there tonight, they're already there, they're already supporters of it. Things like the roadshow playlist, I think the Central Hawke's Bay playlist, I've got the coastal playlist. So there's a lot of that stuff in collateral that's already put up, and a lot of collateral that we share back up to tourism.
Any other questions? Councillor Taylor?
Mine's just about the profit and loss and the budget, or the one from ending June 2024. I don't know what GWC income and expenditure is, but do we know why they've lost $500,000 in MB funding in the whatever the REF funding is? Do we have that sort of detail?
GWC is Great Wines Capital.
Oh, it is too. Yeah.
So that's the international.
Cool. So the MB funding and whatever REF is.
That'll be probably one of the regional funds that they receive. So those are different regions.
Oh, just because there's $500,000. There's almost $700,000 there.
So there were large portions of funding received as a result of Cyclone Gabrielle to boost the visitor. You will remember some of the campaigns that would boost this. The Central Hawke's Bay Staycation, all those sorts of things, or Hawke's Bay Staycation. And plus there was additional COVID money over a 3 or 4 year window, which is now coming to us. Again, that ability to leverage what is the local spend to external spend as well.
Because it's hard to see the balance of you know, when you look at, then you look at the draft budget for the year to come and there's external or other revenue is $4,000. The balance is wrong, although I guess they can't go for that until they've got it.
Diminishing government investment in this space, despite. But in saying that, the leadership narrative has changed from government just recently. Maybe some of the policies around that funding will change too. But if we don't have Hawke's Bay tourism, then even access it.
Does a supplementary question, if I may, does that work the same as the economic fund? You know, if we didn't have a regional organisation, we wouldn't be eligible for the funding. Does the same apply for tourism? Thank you.
So Margaret.
What's the annual sum be a member of?
Hamish talked about that when he was here. It varies on the size of the business.
It does vary.
It does vary on the size of the business, and there's quite a bit of in-kind contribution, and they have agreed to double.
Yeah, it's gone from 3 to 5.
And it's the only RTO in the country that actually has industry leadership. So they're, you know, in terms of private contribution, they're probably. So
what percentage of the total fund is been given by, is that a levy that they're charged? Is that 100% supported by the tourism operators?
10%.
10% of the total fund.
Yeah, so that 185 that you see in the draft budget is the membership income and partner income. Again, they've increased that. As to Mayor Alex's point, yeah, this is the only RTO across the country that's substantially outside of just partnership funding, charges and membership.
Councillor Aitken.
I like your idea about changing it and changing the wording on the going forward. And I was just wondering that we put it as subject to receiving a full acceptable budget for 2026 and full set of accounts for the past 2 years. As well as what Doug's got written down on page 23.
Not averse to having that level of detail, but I just want to check whether that some of that just needs to sit at executive level, and that we've given that direction that we expect that level of due diligence to happen. It's not necessarily then to come back for us to.
I would like to
make
see
the
at
decision.
least the table see what's being spent in Central Hawke's Bay. You know, give a good idea, because I'm sitting here looking at their webpage and they say Central Hawke's Bay, beautiful beaches. And I click on the photo and I think it's Tate Beach, not Tate Beach. It's definitely not a Central Hawke's Bay beach in the photo.
Okay, so
I can't even get that right.
sure, I'm not sure, but maybe we should ask Mr. Tate. Do you think it would be possible for them to actually provide a budget that says how much is spent on CHB contributed? Because my sense is probably not.
Through you, I don't think so. And look, as we work through probably what is the it'll be a little bit like trying to break down the 65, you know, the 75,000 contribution. If Wairoa makes a 25,000 contribution, please demonstrate what like 25,000 is contributing to. Where I think you've got to get back to is confidence that we're setting up a process that's going to confirm what KPIs are, what letters of expectation are, and what you want to receive for the funds that you're spending. And then from then, that's about how you work. We then work through what the full budget is. The reality is the budget is going to be the number that they ring fence, and we're going to have to work back from that. So my suggestion, Your Worship, is happy to have the resolution amended to say something along the lines of subject to further due diligence by the Chief Executive. Again, based on the level of expenditure, the level of spend, the level of risk that's involved in this. You know, you allow me to execute multi-million-dollar contracts under delegation. I'll leave that with you.
I wonder whether, you know, the 4 bullet points that are on the bottom of page 23.
Yeah.
What about if we add one that says a rigorous budget provided, or
At least the chief
something like that,
executive.
and then pick up that with those 4 points and put it in the resolution and say we're doing this, knowing that these are the 5 things that are going to be considered by the executive as this is actioned.
And if they're not, we don't give them the money.
Okay.
Because the $860,000 odd that they put in their budget, that is And then over half their budget, they just put it as a line.
Yeah, but remembering also they've got an independent board of directors and they're not owned by us, they're owned by, so it is a
I get it's complicated, but if they want money from the
Yeah.
public,
Yeah, you know, they've got to do the details, agreed.
exactly.
Okay, so, testing my chairmanship ability, councillor,
Good.
to make things up on the fly. Councillor, Greta.
Let's go back. You made mention earlier on that the Hastings and Napier councils are increasing their funding.
450,
What is that like?
I think it's 450 or ish,
450 each.
but I think Hastings is their meeting to discuss it is today as well.
Okay, thank you.
That's the one here.
And just quickly, so these budgets and things that they do, is it correct that their accounts would be audited? When they not have this information?
Sorry, I said again, I didn't quite follow.
When they present this budget.
Yeah.
Don't these accounts get audited? So shouldn't they have these figures? Is that correct?
I'm not sure of the detail of that, councillor. And I'm also not quite sure of the detail of, and I'm being able to get the confirmation from HBRC either about actually what they were requesting from them, so. I mean, we can't change the past, we can only put the best foot forward to take it forward, I suppose is the way I would look at it. Can't change the
I know we
governance.
can't, but it just amazes me.
I know, councillor Taylor.
Is the council grants in their budget of $1 million, is that taking into account an possible increase from Napier Hastings?
Yeah. I was just working up a reaction to the resolution. Useful. Also just want to pick up, councillor Annand, what you said before about, is it possible to, some of this to come from existing budgets? I don't think that us doing this is immediately saying that there's a line that says ratepayers will, if it is an immediate increase to rate take of 75,000, I think the intent is this is inside the budget and all of the moving and shuffling and right sizing that's going on needs to take that into consideration if we're going to include it. Yeah, so this is not a resolution that says Central Hawke's Bay District Council will have a rate that says 75,000 directly from ratepayer pocket like that. I think the intent is that's sitting inside the continuing development of the annual plan. So just,
The unders and overs.
so I don't think your point is ignored. I think
No.
it's heard. And it's part of the process. Okay, can we just flip the bold words around? So we have to confirms the proposed budget provision. So take the request, the funding from Hawke's Bay Tourism out. Take out the words, the request for funding from Hawke's Bay Tourism. So we confirm the proposed budget provision of 75,000 in the annual plan. Or after annual plan. Or Hawke's Bay Tourism. Formulation, yeah. There's no fix. How's that?
Yeah, I'll move that.
So that's the 4 bullet points that were in the paper, plus an additional one that says detailed future operating budget, councillor.
So I'll second that.
I'm going to move it, councillor Moynihan. I don't think I
Should I
had.
move it?
Tim's going to move,
I'll second it.
councillor Aitken's going to move, and councillor Moynihan's going to second. Has anyone got anything further to say?
I love how we get stuck on small things.
Councillor Taylor, would you like to speak to the resolution?
Councillor Aitken's comments are valid and a sad indictment on the governance that's come from the council that's previously had this responsibility. But also perhaps a sad indictment on us for not following up with where, you know, they said they were going to take a regional stance on tourism, and perhaps we've also fallen down on not making sure that they did it properly. So, but yeah, I think, so a good. outcome.
Yeah, I'm against it. I don't think we should be supporting it at all. We started up with a paper on our annual plan and what we're spending, and the worship clearly said that we've cut back all extravagance and we're back to basics. Well, I don't see this as a core basic. And we're supporting something, giving $75,000 to an industry that only looks after the people that benefit from it, the people in the tourism industry and the retailers. We don't know what benefit Central Hawke's Bay gets out of it. They haven't given us any costings, and I think it's just throwing $75,000 away, which we can't afford to do.
Anyone else? So this is important for me for two reasons to support this. The first one is that the way we work together as a region is increasingly important, and I'm a bit like you, Councillor Taylor, frustrated at the role or lack of role and lack of leadership from regional council on this issue that has kind of ended us in this situation. I'm frustrated by that. But the continuing work together at a regional level on issues like this that are complex, it's actually just about impossible to divide a visitor economy up to say this is Napier, this is Hastings, and this is Wairoa, and this is Central Hawke's Bay. It's actually just about impossible to do that. So it makes absolute sense for us to be approaching this as the marketing of brand Hawke's Bay with its component parts together, and the way that we work together on that is important. We have been leading that collaborative direction for several years now. We have leaned in very heavily to how we do things together as a region with our other territorial authorities in particular. And the intent of continuing to work together. That has since then been followed with how government talks about how they want to work with us on our priorities around economic growth as well. And so there's many signals that say this is the way that we need to be facing. The second thing for me is that promotion of brand Hawke's Bay is really important in creating the growth and hope for the next stages as we move further out of recovery and out of this economic doldrum that we're in at the moment, and how we continue to inspire that hope. And if we're not promoting brand Hawke's Bay, what it will be is brand Hastings and brand Napier, and then we're just not visible at all. So actually, in terms of the vibrancy that and recognition that our community needs in the picture that is Hawke's Bay, this is important for continuing that growth and aspiration in our businesses and our community to see themselves in it. And all of the conversation today about the visibility of what happens here, the detail of how this is governed, and the rigour that needs to be applied to an organisation like this that is serving and paid for at local community level are all absolutely justified, and it now sits incumbent on us to make sure that that is followed through. So two really important things for me on supporting this. Councillor Aitken, you have got right of reply.
I will. While I'm supporting this, I'm supporting it as long as we get that rigour coming back from our CEO. And I'm going to ask Doug Mr. Tate, whether he can actually inform me whether that rigour is correct as the mover, and maybe able to see it and bring it back to the council, whether we get yes or no and the reasons why. I haven't done it because of the collaboration of Hawke's Bay. I do get the fact that it is Hawke's Bay, but this is about our ratepayers getting value for money and showing that level of detail that we've expected from everyone we've put money towards. It doesn't matter whether it's $10,000 or $5,000. When we have the grants we give out, we rigorously look how much money we're spending, because it is ratepayers' money. It's not ours. And the other thing I'd like to see too is that the 10% income that they get from their tourist operators, the other ones that directly benefit, they should be paying at least 50%. The other ones that benefit, so that's not part of our thing. So I'm supporting it as long as we get those points agreed to. And I think we can go back to Hamish and his team and say that I think most of us around this table were pretty disappointed in the way he presented to us and the figures he used. You can't use your own annual report figures when you're asking for money from a council, which shows pretty poor judgment on their behalf.
Right, thank you. It's moved and seconded, the amended resolution that we did have on screen before, with the 5 points on it. All those in favour, please say aye. Yes. Carried. Uh, 2025 local election candidate order on page 26 of the agenda. Who's just left?
That's right. Oh,
Oh.
Ms. Budge has just joined us again, so.
We're on your paper, Jane. Local election candidate order.
Ata Maria, your worship and councillors. Yes, I'll take the paper as read. Basically you have 3 options: random, pseudo-random or alphabetical. And we've used random for the last 2 elections and alphabetical prior to that. Random is kind of effectively the most random. Pseudo-random is kind of random but the same as alphabetical. Just the same order on every single election paper that goes out to everybody. And random is basically, it's the machine randomizes every single election voting papers that go out. So.
Councillor Byrne.
Can I just move that we go the last 2 rooms and go
Council
random?
approves the candidate names order be random.
Second that.
Councillor Taylor's going to second it.
I want them alphabetical.
Yeah.
Good, okay, well.
I said no.
Solution that is moved and seconded, so you can share your views and debate, councillor. Okay, councillor Byrne. Councillor Byrne.
He's literally said that every
I
time.
know. Councillor Byrne, would you like to speak?
And I just think that it's, well, actually, I think if it's not broke, don't change it. And yeah, I think random is just fair for all. Yeah, that's my point. I don't believe it needs to be changed.
Okay, councillor Taylor.
As councillor Taylor versus councillor Aitken and Byrne, which are at the front. No, completely random is the best way to go. And as councillor Byrne said, it's not broke, it's worked.
Thank you, councillor Aitken, and then, no, not the same thing. Councillor Moynihan.
I support random order. I think I moved it last time. And I just went back and got my points last time and I'll read them again. It eliminates alphabetical bias, ensuring all candidates have an equal chance of being noticed first. It could encourage votes to evaluate all candidates rather than stopping at the very first view. That's my reason.
Thank you. Anyone else? I'm going to put that then the council approves the candidate names order be random on the voting documents for 2025 local election in Central Hawke's Bay District and by elections over the 25 to 28 triennium and all future local elections until further notice. All those in favour will say aye. Aye. Against, carried. It does, sometimes it does make me laugh at the powers that legislation give us that just feels so a little bit. Right, this is not silly. This is risk and assurance committee risk report to this council. Which is from the work on the risk register the committee saw on 11th of December. Welcome, Ms. Sparsfield.
Thank you. Good morning, councillors. So before you is the regular risk report that comes to council. And as Her Worship has just mentioned, we had a workshop with you late last year to go through the risk appetite statements. So you'll see in this report, similar to what I did for risk and assurance in December, that some of the more simple changes have been made. So you'll notice that there's either a change to the title or there might have been some new risks added for specificity or any any of the outcomes of that conversation. There are a couple of other actions which require some more time with ELT in terms of developing the new risks that you'd suggested through that conversation. But the plan is that they'll go to the March risk and assurance meeting, and then you'll see them again next time this report comes through. I'm happy to take any questions or pass it over to the team. You will see the usual kind of update, when it's out of risk appetite, there's a comment there. The new ones are included. I'm happy to take any questions.
So when you say new comments, that is not what was on the risk register in December when Risk and Assurance saw it. This is updated commentary now that's come here that hasn't gone to the committee.
No, sorry, just to clarify, this is what went in December.
Oh,
to
okay,
Risk and
so this
Assurance.
is the December commentary.
Yes,
It's possible
that's
some of
commentary.
these may have shifted.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Not necessarily what we're testing today. We just want to look at things that have moved in and out of risk appetite or that have changed and new. It's the focus for today.
Just for accuracy, I'm assuming the Q1 and Q2 are 2025. You're not looking at 2020. Just it hasn't been up.
Yes.
Is it?
The table.
It should say, you're right, it should say 2020.
Yeah, I was assuming that it was, but I didn't want to assume and then have completely misunderstood it.
That is a note. Thank you, Councillor Taylor.
Makes more sense with it being 25.
Yeah. Apologies for that typo. I will get that updated.
There's one for me that I just wanted to point out, and that is the one that talks about failure of critical roading infrastructure, which is page 35. And that's a new one to be in there. And it talks about examples of road infrastructure that are particularly vulnerable, but that's the one that kind of needs more specificity. Like in the water stuff, we're really specific about your reservoir, Abbotsford Reservoir, and the rising and falling mains. But in the road one, we haven't got there yet, but I think we're getting there. It's a new risk. It's new commentary. So
yes, and through your worship, that exact conversation happened in the December risk and assurance when I was looking back at my notes. And I think the request was to consider that to be included, that level of detail either in the AMPs, and there is a matrix that the land transport team uses with in terms of the highest risk roading infrastructure and what they use internally, and adding some more information here. And that might be appropriate to come out as part of the what I should have added earlier is that we've started the risk controls gap analysis workshop with the Risk and Assurance Committee. So that would be appropriate to have that discussion as part of that conversation because it's about the controls and the description of things.
So the controls conversation is a good example of why and how we've had that phasing conversation about reservoir investment and second supply. That's where inherently this has come from. We've got controls in here about how we're discussing how you work with those controls. Councillor Moynihan.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. My question's pretty quick. Do we know, or is there any upcoming regulatory changes from central government that might pose any new risks that we are aware of?
So through you, Your Worship, there's a number of reform areas happening both within the RMA and in particular to the system of how building consents are undertaken at a national level. In regards to the building consent conversation, that is at early stages. I have provided information in previous reports. Is it a top risk to our business? Probably not. I would more package that up as an opportunity to work regionally and look at how we do work across the district councils. In regards to the RMA, there's many items, but again, are they a top risk? If they do become one, then yes, it would become into this report, absolutely. But right now, off the top of my head, I can't think of anything that should be included.
Water services legislation, probably, and economic regulation. One, but the controls for that are the work we're doing together on the regional entity as the great question, Councillor Moynihan. You've only missed 2 committee meetings. We've missed you clearly.
Oh, I just like to say, I must admit, the report's quite very detailed.
Yeah.
And I actually quite read it, and I didn't have any question actually, but
Nice, councillor Annand.
My question is, well, my request really is that we actually add to the risk register, around the smart growth stuff, like ours is, a lot of this is about compliance and things like that, but my interest is in our smart growth review and ensuring that we are a community that people can develop in. And I wouldn't mind just some monitoring of that for a little time. And then also I was hoping that we could, especially with the building consent and everything, and that being massively down, because it's a huge risk for us as a community. And the other thing that I was sort of looking at, and biggest, I guess the hardest part for us is that it's about visual, what we see on the ground, and visually, well, what I know is it was set as one of our key pillars or big moves was accountable delivery. I've noted through the business that we've had contract management and tools being put in place to be able to increase the performance of our contract managers, but contract providers. But I am struggling to reconcile that with visibly what I am seeing on the ground. SnapSend Solve has always been the thing that has sort of been my go-to. And the numbers of SnapSend Solve and reports are low. I don't see that as a good thing. I see that as a negative. I think that that's us losing our social license, which is number one on the risk register. So yeah, I just would like us to potentially get some sort of reporting into the risk, and so that we a risk insurance, so that we can have the contract management is not just actually being done, but it's actually working on the ground, and then our people will start to see a visible notice and difference in that. Yeah.
Thank you. I actually seem to recollect we had a conversation about contract management at the meeting.
Yes, so through your worship, there are a number of points there, and I'll try and address each of them individually. So if we just start with the most recent ones in terms of the contract management and performance, at the ELT meeting that we had this week, it is our intention, we discussed it, to start bringing some reporting, which we've been receiving at ELT, on contract performance and how we give visibility to elected members over that. And in terms of your reference to SnapSend Solve as one of the controls update on that, we're looking at changing across to the community engagement app, hoping to have that by mid. Yes, you would have seen that in weekly words to elected members, but not that is part of the risk. It's more about contract performance, I think your point was. Your other 2 points in terms of the requests, in regards to the building consenting revenue being down, you will hear more through the annual plan conversation in terms of what the plan is, and we're at the, I hope, the final stages of resolving the risk completely. So it's something that we've addressed through the annual plan, and it's part of that wider conversation, but happy to have that conversation offline with exactly where we're at, maybe in one of the breaks. And in regards to your point around the smart growth review, monitoring, tracking, similar conversation when I presented to council about some of the potential trade-offs with the drop in activity in both of those consenting areas. That was one of the things that I put up that would either slow down or not happen. So again, if we need to have that conversation again, revisit that, some of that request might not be possible with the potential changes that are happening across the consenting activities. So happy to have that discussion further. It was one of the topics from the earlier annual plan.
Yeah, and I actually, the Risk Insurance Committee also had a conversation about that risk category in our last workshop, actually, about the fact that that category that talks about risk and smart growth is about council unable to service development, and got a high risk appetite on that, which means we know we've got gaps, but we're still continuing to work on allowing that and promoting that growth can and should happen. We're okay with that. But I think the bit that's not understood in that risk area is that actually our risk appetite for the customer interaction and promotion of good process is actually not high. It's actually probably low to medium. So there's actually two the customer interface, the people interface bit, which is a lot of the smart growth review, is actually, we have a lot less appetite to be doing that stuff wrong. So it's an interesting area.
And through you, your worship, that's the part that we've largely focused on, and we've seen a significant step change. And even with the changes that come in coming months in terms of annual plan, I anticipate that our expectations wouldn't change in terms of the customer interaction. That's the part that is important. And from my perspective, in terms of priorities, that we retain some pieces of it, we just won't be able to do everything.
Thank you. Okay, great questions, great feedback, great conversation. Instead of moving something to notes. This risk report, please. Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Byrne. I just would like to add that thank you, Mrs. Spousfield and the team for bringing the visibility consistently, now bringing this to council. It's really helping the risk conversation deepen into the governance table and not just be the. So thank you. I'd also like to add anything. Those in favour, please say aye. Against. This item is a whole bunch of minutes. And all of these minutes from the committees are not for us to confirm that they're true or correct here. This is us just receiving them for the continuity of the narrative and that we know what's happening. Chairs of those committees, questions and is this correct? Are we on track? Conversations will all come through your committees, not through here. This is about us making sure everyone's across where everyone's at and it's on the record. So I'm not even going to invite questions on the minutes, to be honest, because it's not our job to change them. But we are receiving them. Can I have a mover in a second? Councillor Annand. She runs quick with their hands today. Everyone wants to move and second things. Comment. All those in favour, please say aye. We'll work those and be totally on for the committee meetings in a couple of weeks' time to take the next step of them. Then page 59 is minutes from joint committees. We have regional transport, climate action, civil defence and regional transport. I think actually all four of these have been verbally spoken about at the council table by the members that are on them as they've been to them. So we've actually already talked about most of these. This is again just on board. If there are any, I will allow questions on this one if there are any outstanding questions on this. Any of those? Councillor Moynihan.
Yes, it might be pointed to Councillor Taylor, but I just saw in the report, central government levels of service for NZTA, 95% of potholes on high clarification roads will be repaired within 24 hours of identification. 85% of potholes on lower classification roads. And that was all an average over the whole of Hawke's Bay area. My question is, could we ask or get NZTA to provide a breakdown in regards to pothole percentage repairs in the 24-hour period for CHB area?
Councillor, can you just tell me the page number that is on that you're just talking about?
Page 63 on ours, 4 on theirs. And it was.
Through you, Chair, I can definitely ask in my next conversation with Linda if that could be done, but I imagine she's reliant on the statistics that are done by NZTA at this level, so I have no idea whether she'll be able to.
I mean, it's an average, but I just thought could they have a breakdown, just so we're making sure we get in our percentage repair.
Yeah.
Because I just.
On their road.
Yeah, it's on their roads, yeah, but it was just one pot I remember outside the shop and took 3 months. Before the government said you're going to correct, so that's why I put it up.
Thank you. I knew I could rely on you to recorded those minutes. Councillor Moynihan, good job. Thank you. Anything else? Otherwise, I'll look for a mover and second to see those. Councillor Witchman
Yes,
and
thank you.
Councillor Greer. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against. Chief Executive report, which is our second quarter org report for October to December last year. A huge report across a huge breadth of things that the organisation is doing. Mr. Tate, would you like to?
So if obviously closing out what is the second quarter or the halfway mark for the 2024-2025 year. Look, I've noted in my opening kind of comments, obviously some of the things that we've already discussed today and are featuring on the workshop agendas and upcoming council agendas and committee agendas, particularly annual plan, roading recovery, local water done well, and closed out our representation review end of last year. But probably just really want to note through the report, really the big effort of work that has gone into particularly the land transport and waters activities the end of last year to really get a lot of those activities up and running over the Christmas break. I know the teams have been busy, and certainly on the 6th of January was busy. I was busy off signing procurement things as a number of others were awarding contracts left, right and centre. So certainly for this quarter's report, really looking forward to seeing a number of those big projects come to life, and certainly we'll see the attached expenditure that comes with those. It's already started trickling through. So certainly the big shift that we're going to see from what was really a re-establishment of our big capital programs from last year, the inertia that comes with those big procurements, and now seeing that translate into visible action. Probably just the other thing that I do want to note is obviously this report now includes our non-financial performance measures as we go through everything, noting there's still a number of activities that are on track or to be achieved in terms of customer satisfaction surveys, which we've got shortly to get underway in a slightly different format for this coming year. But noting overall that in terms of the levels of service performance measures that we set, many of those are tracking well. There's the odd area, particularly in some of the cemeteries area, where we've had some matters dealt with, but overall tracking well. Other than that, look, we've provided updates across your elected members' priorities, and again, they're reflected back through each of your committee structures, with again a pretty chunky work program to get through ahead of September 2025. So other than that, your worship, just really want to say thank you to the team for the big efforts, particularly over that Christmas end of year, Christmas New Year break. For those that worked through the Christmas break as well, thank you. And now as we look into 2025, really looking forward to translating that from planning now into delivery. So happy to take any
Questions?
Just one quick one. When reading through the report,
It's a page number when you get to your question.
yeah, page 118, libraries level of service performance report. In regards to the level of service performance measures in regards to our libraries, instead of grouping them together, could we see individual performance targets for each library? This could show how each one is performing. And why I brought that up, because in the last annual plan, we did say we would cut down some hours on a certain library, et cetera, et cetera. So it was just thought if they were individually done, making a decision like that, you could say, well, it's actually quite strongly supported. So that's why I brought it up.
Thank you.
Very wish we can just split down how we've made that number up in reporting data. So that's it. That's easy enough done.
Okay.
We used to do it.
Yeah, I think we did. Yeah.
I remember there was a time when the door wasn't working in Waipawa, and so we could see that in the numbers. So
we had the total number, but we provide you the breakdown. So we'll just make sure that that breakdown goes into the.
thank you, Councillor Aitken.
A couple of questions, page 111, Civic Theatre. How much do we, I know we rent it, do we give them any money to help run the theatre as a council? How much?
That's an unfair question. If we want to brief them on that, let's take that as an action to take further on.
Well, I should have seen it, but I was just looking before, and the reason is because I was just looking at how many people have attended the theatre.
Yeah.
And for per screening, there's 14 per screening on average. And I was just sitting here going, well, how much is that costing us? And do we need to have a serious look at it in the future going forward? Because obviously it's not economically viable.
Well, I don't think you can say that without actually having explored the whole case of how it's
Well,
put
that's
together.
why I wanted.
So noted that in forward work programs that we pick up on how we look at that.
Yeah. The other one on page 115. The support to the Marais, is that just staff support or is there any monetary support on that?
Through you, your worship, I'll just get to the page, but it will only be FTE support, so staff support.
I assume it was.
But councillor, and sorry, councillor Greer, she actually had her hand up.
My question, I'm aware that that this is the report the last year, but I just was wondering if in our recent flooding event, that we had here in Central Hawke's Bay in this quarter, if we were happy with the response of this movement, what do they say? It says, you know, it's something. Are we doing it to prepare ourselves for
Your page on that level of service?
was
Sorry.
Through you, look, I'm happy to give an extra briefing on the stormwater. I think April meeting has, well, April Finance Infrastructure and Performance meeting has a big stormwater story update. Fair to say that was January the date, that event, in terms of Waipawa in particular, which was probably the most impacted. You know, I was out and about with the acting duty manager at that time. You know, you only had to drive 200 metres and it wasn't even raining, so it was a very localised storm event. Probably where the big impacts of that event did happen, though, were to do with the High Street piece of work, which related to NZTA, and there were 3 blocked culverts that were obviously being repaired at the time. So that was a large part of what the issue was there. But look, just noting that there is still more work to do. I know that there's been some correspondence with residents that were particularly impacted on that one. If there's probably any particular areas of focus for the big stormwater story update for the April FIP meeting. Probably a good place for us to really delve into that.
I'll make a request to that meeting as part of that report. Would be really good to see what the response was from our contractors straight after, you know, like with the increase in stormwater management and that we have actually done in the last year, and also that we're proposing to do for this year as well. It would be really nice to just hear practically on the ground what the difference was in the response to that stormwater event that we haven't seen in the past. No, when you increase spend, you expect an increase in behaviour on the ground, especially after a significant event like that. It would be really important, I think, to know what that was, what that resulted in.
Sure.
Because we also have done a lot of work in actually ensuring that our contractors have a more methodical way of dealing with our stormwater management as well, which was part of our solution.
Yeah.
So it'd be really nice to hear.
So it would be really helpful if you could go back to those emails of where we did get some of that information about the activity they did, and maybe give some specifics on what would be helpful to come in that future report.
You know, like, and I'll give a practical example. We would expect, well, I would expect that after a significant event that you would see people out clearing the drains. And you would also see other contractors who are not necessarily in the storm management, but management, if they buy a drain and they walk past it, they could actually do their bit to clear that out and things like that. I'm interested in the small stuff.
Yeah, and how it escalates.
How it escalates, yeah. How one activity is supporting the other activity. You're a rubbish collector, you're also looking at the storm waters around you and going, okay, what can I do while I'm here to do something to be able to prevent that from flooding next time? If we get an event like that, that just comes out of the blue. It's, you know, I'm really interested in this.
Thank you. That's good. Councillor Byrne.
Quickly further to that, it was also the prevention, because I mean, part of our stormwater story was actually when there was a heavy rain event forecast, that we'd actually be checking and just to check that that was actually happening.
To be fair, we had 20 minutes of that thunderstorm.
20 minutes, but then there was forecast, thunderstorms forecast. Yeah. I mean, I guess you didn't know where it was going to hit, but you know.
So hear all of that. It sounds like we need to have a further in-depth conversation about that. That's fine.
Yeah.
But also remembering that the level of service of our stormwater network is about actually houses that get flooded with water for them. And I'm not diminishing the fact that the road being flooded or the back garden being flooded is an event, because it is, but actually we've got to make sure we're targeting our investment in the right place for our level of service. So let's have a more in-depth conversation about it, so everyone understands what we have done and what it's looking like.
Yeah.
Councillor Greer.
Thank you. Just on the RFSs on page 100, the animal services and compliance seems to be quite a substantial increase. Is that a trend? And I don't know, if you can comment, is that a concern?
Through your worship, in terms of the question about being a trend, we need to go back to sort of the previous reporting periods to answer that question. I know there was a fair bit of activity before Christmas in particular, as the infringement notices went out for not just the dogs, so there may have been a fair bit of communication given those infringement notices that were sent out. But we can come back to you certainly in terms of whether it's a trend or not.
Thank you. I think it's important, actually coming back to what Councillor Annan said before, context of we have people talk at us about the potholes and the water leaks and what have you, but actually more often than not, people pick up the phone to complain about animals and tree activity. And so there's a disconnect there of hearing how people think that they could or should report and how it's treated.
I guess why I ask is that, you know, over the summer, I've never seen so many dogs off leashes on beaches. And some of them are dangerous dogs, and they're not necessarily local ratepayers' dogs. They're out of towners as well. Yeah, so it's alarming.
Yeah, well, if you look at the news headlines around the country, we're not the only place that's seen that too. I mean, there's a fairly vociferous thing going on in Auckland at the moment too. Okay, thanks. Anyone else?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, mine was actually on the same issue, but on a different page. So 126, the actual breakdown of the levels of service on that. Just noted that we had number of dogs unregistered at 307, and I just wanted to know if there's a way, to say whether that's up or down. Is that plus the dog attacks in the next line going from 4 to 8. And I just wondered if that's a risk. At what stage does that stop being in here and comes through as a risk, or gets highlighted somewhere else as a growing risk?
So that's kind of the known unregistered, but there's always the unknown unknowns. So at this stage, I don't think there's significant risk in terms of being reported back separately. The team will continue to kind of focus on key activities as they work through things. You'll recall we do receive that annual end of year kind of report as we kind of probably look ahead to that, and usually kind of the August period is probably a good opportunity about how we bring a bit more information in terms of the trends, the longer term trends that have come with that, if that's of interest. But if there's certainly operationally, it's a question that I'll ask with the team. If there is kind of heightened risk or heightened concern that we need to see. Not just speaking from experience this time of year, we always see a peak when people are home and gates are open, and so it's not an uncommon trend.
Through you, your worship, it's more as well, like we get the annual report in August, but we're currently doing annual plan for budgets for who gets what, and if this is growing and getting worse, or and it's just I guess not just this issue, but others, how it gets escalated to us so that we actually can see that coming through.
Yeah, so I think escalate, I mean, the ELT operates in that space of those issues coming through. If on that particular dog one, for instance, we see on the reports of RFSs that it's really high, but in the levels of service about response times, we're at 100% ability to deal with that level of service. So it doesn't look like, even those high reports, doesn't look like there's a level of service challenge. So. Okay. Any other questions? Thank you. This report, like we say, every single council meeting, I think, should be published and promoted. And this is where members of the public can see everything that happens in council. It's a huge report that some effort has gone to collate and put together. And while it's of value to us, actually, it's probably even of more value to those that don't sit in this room. So if we can to promote and share that, I think that would be helpful.
We do publish a few. Oh.
Such. Well, if it's not promoted, you'd never be able to find it.
Noted. Yeah.
It's a whole other issue.
Yeah.
Website's another conversation.
Okay, so we have a resolution to note the second quarter organisation report, 1 October to 31 December 2024. For the place. Taylor. That's Brett. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. The final item is just the date of the next meeting, which is April. And coming up into April, we are going to see a lot more on some of these core big projects for the business, like Local Water Done Well and regional deals. They are currently are not sitting at a level of governance decision making and reporting at the moment, and we really need them to get to there. And so those would be things coming up into April, as well as the continuation of our annual plan work. Those are the really big moves, and looking forward to that. The next meeting will be held on the 10th of April, 2025. Can I have a mover and second, please? Councillor Annand. Councillor Lennon. All those in favour? Aye. Against. Agreed. And just before we close, a moment to share our reflections with those that were impacted from Cyclone Gabrielle 2 years ago, the journey that they've been on for the last 2 years and continue to be on. While many people in our community actually want to put their heads down and carry on and move on, there's still many people who can't, and there's still uncertainty. And that we make sure we take that moment today and tomorrow over that time to make sure we're thinking about that and how we are engaging with our community on those particular issues, because it's still there. We've heard it talked about at some length today when it comes to stormwater, while it was not said out loud. The trauma in Waipawa when it comes to the impact of the drains and the flooding in Waipawa, particular to that, has created a sensitivity around levels of service and the expectations on council in that, and what that means for people's lives, livelihoods and property. And we haven't spoken at length about roading recovery, which is a miracle, because we usually talk about it a lot. We have not spoken about the continued uncertainty in Pōrongaho around the design of their flood protection scheme and the work that's coming from that. But I do know this week that we finally had the last kaumātua who had been living in temporary accommodation following the cyclone from Pōrongaho is actually now has been put into a Kāinga Ora property, so with far more security of tenure. And so we're still continuing 2 years down the track to look after individuals, and let's make sure we continue to think like that. Trauma doesn't go away. Red Cross visited yesterday to see the impact of some of their investment that have come into the community, the 50 household packs that were sponsored by them, which made a big impact, the ongoing community resilience investment they've helped us with, The big things that are different in our community now, 2 years down the track, are the number of volunteers and community groups that are involved in our community resilience planning and community hubs. We saw an amazing group of volunteers at Otana yesterday that showed off to Red Cross about how they'd done their plan and how they operated their emergency hub. It was really cool. So we're certainly in a stronger place because of that. But I just wanted to make sure that we mark that moment today to remember that time and the continuing things that are happening in our community. But as we're building, continuing to build back into a space that's not about recovery anymore and about continuing to build that thriving future that we all know is so important for our communities. Thank you for your work today and thank you for recognising that together. So with that, at 10:35, I will close today's meeting. We've got some further workshops to do for the rest of the day, including some that will be published and available on our website, information on things like land transport, QV, mostly land transport and QV actually, that will be available on the website after our workshops. Thank you. That's our meeting closed today.